ZN Life is brought to you by ZN, the OG digital agency in Brussels.
Live from Brussels, it's ZN Live. I am very happy to be co-hosting the 377th episode with Julie, one of our amazing account managers today. And we have a very special guest, Ross Jennings, who is a presenter and a content creator, as well as a co-founder of Brecons, a travel brand curating adventures around the world. Ross, I have to say I was very mesmerized by your Instagram profile as you're backpiping around the world. And I saw that so far you visited 110 countries where you are backpiping all over. So I'm very interested to know how it is for you to navigate language, cultural differences on your travels.
First off, thanks for having me, you lot. It's great to be able to chat about bagpipes because I love the bagpipes. I am currently sat in Edinburgh, which is quite fitting, I suppose. And that is where it's kind of my elected home. I'm not really from here. I didn't grow up here, but I went to university here, and it's my base when I'm back in the UK. So yeah, bagpiping and travels. I've been traveling with my bagpipes for just over 10 years now, and my aim is to play them in every single country of the world. And honestly, without being too cheesy, it's been totally life-changing. I mean, I've had some great adventures. I've met my partner as a result of it, so big tick there. And I suppose I've been able to work with some pretty cool brands and tourism boards around the world, and PR companies like yourselves included.
Yeah, so actually on that note, Ross, given that you have collaborated with so many different tourism organizations, including one of our clients, ETC, what have your experiences been there? What are some key learnings, some key insights that you've basically gathered from those collaborations and from creating content within those types of collaborations?
Oof, okay, you went straight for it, straight into it. Right. So when I first started traveling, it was 2014, and I think the whole world was navigating how they were going to use social media as a way of marketing, especially in the travel sphere. And honestly, I met plenty of companies that said, no, we're not going to launch on it. This is ridiculous. It's a fad. Social media is just for naughty things and not for serious business. I'm like, that has not aged well. So when I first started, even without a big following, what I started to do was reach out to tourism boards, not on a national level, but on a regional level, because I knew I wasn't big enough and I didn't have that credibility. The concept of working with tourism boards, as you know, has existed for a while. They've always done press, fam trips. So the industry was there. It was just where were these influencers or content creators going to fit in? So I then made a website and started to try and fit in as much as I could, and then started convincing basically these regional tourism boards to take me on board. And one of the first ones that I worked with was the Sabah tourism boards under, I suppose they would be under Malaysian tourism. Mm-hmm. And I remember they were asking for details like blog stats and how many viewers per month, because bloggers had obviously done these sorts of things and they were the kind of OG influencers and content creators. But how did like Instagrammers and Facebookers work in there? TikTokers were yet to exist. So I started from that. And because I didn't have much of a following, I think I was very good at just, hassling the hell out of people and convincing people that this was a good idea because they would get a really unique partnership out of it. Yes, they might not have got the maybe the numbers that Travel and Leisure can provide in a magazine or a massive blogger, but no one else is going to be pairing up bagpipes, hiking up your mountain in Malaysia, taking a really awesome photo. And from that, I think I got a bit of confidence and was able to use that, build a bit more of a following, and then start pitching and working to more tourism boards. I was then able to work with national tourism boards and then find different mechanisms of contacting and working with them. And there's so many aspects to that. And I know we'll probably touch upon that when it comes to communication and how to get in contact with folk. But I think a big thing initially to start was trust. And how do you build trust from these government bodies working with individuals like myself who, let's say, like really don't have much credibility other than maybe a large-ish number. So lots of ups and downs, COVID obviously being a big one, but huge learning curves. And I'm still very grateful to be part of the travel industry. Just.
No, and I think what's also very interesting about you is that you definitely have a unique hook in that sense, right? So like traveling with your bagpipe, it's not something that you see very often on social media. So I think this also for sure gives you an edge in that sense, and makes you maybe like a little bit more interesting as compared to maybe some other people that are in the field. It's definitely like a very very interesting hook. And I mean, Ross, given that you do travel to so many different places, you're also obviously often in different cultures with people speaking different languages around you, and you create content in the different locations that you go to. How do you how do you navigate that in terms of your content creation? So making sure that you are also showing, the cultural aspects, the local traditions that are around you in your content. What type of strategies basically do you employ for that?
Well, first off, it changes, I suppose, and you've got to adapt to what people want and maybe what the industry wants. And look, I'll be honest, when I first started traveling, it was a bit of a selfish goal, to be honest. And I think part of you has to be a bit selfish when you're working in certain industries to put photos of yourself online. It is the idea of that 10 years ago was kind of shameless, but you have to get over that and then get very good at marketing yourself. So when I first started, I went to a travel conference. Actually, that was the thing that got things going. And it was more of an adventure travel conference, meeting adventurers, because adventurers had existed before, these epic folk who had climbed mountains. And maybe those were the actual OG influencers, well, other than politicians and other people, but on the travel sphere. We'll stay away from that, in the travel sphere. And that gave me this idea to want to do my own records. And so it was initially quite a selfish goal, because I wanted to be the first person to do something. And I thought, easy peasy, people are going to sponsor me. Done. Didn't work like that. So then I had to work for it. And I think that is probably a good thing, because you don't want things to come easy to you in life, because you don't learn from your mistakes and the struggles and challenges. So I am coming back to your question. I thought I'd give a starting point. How does one navigate using culture and whatnot? So I very quickly learned that the bagpipes were this wonderful cultural catalyst, basically, that I could be, and I could just do it even within 2 hours. I would walk down the streets just wearing regular clothing, and I would have just nice interactions with folk. If I walked down that same street with a kilt and bagpipes in hand, it would be an entirely different outcome. Because people would stop, ask me questions, or be like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, why are you wearing a skirt?" And that the kilts and bagpipes were almost like this cape. I felt like a bit of a superhero, because I was like, "Wow, okay, I really have to justify, why do I not sound Scottish?
Yeah.
Why am I wearing this kilt? What are the bagpipes about?" So from my initial travels, I had to go learn a lot about myself, about I suppose my culture, or the culture of my family, and then be able to answer that on future trips. And then I decided, you know what, let's take that and turn that into content, because that's a big part of travel. We all travel for many reasons. One of them is the cultural interactions. And let's make content around that. Folk culture, traditions, and that's kind of what I try and do now. I say, if I'm pitching to folk, that yes, I make content on travel, but specifically traditions and I suppose folk culture in particular. Now, why is that important? I think it's important because often folk cultures are turned into a bit of a novelty in some places. And even the word folk, it's a bit annoying, really, because it's kind of sidelined. And I've learned that by going around the world and doing things like workshops in schools. When I will visit a school, there's always and I visit a music department, there will be this, here are the instruments of the world. And they are always very European instruments, generic standardized instruments. And then there's like a novelty section of folk instruments, and the bagpipes is sometimes there, or it might be things like the didgeridoo or the oud, or other instruments native to particular places, which is a bit frustrating, really. There's the generic standard. So part of me wants to kind of break that attitude, but also highlight and maybe use this folk instrument that I have to highlight other folk cultures. Because in many places around the world, I was just in India, a lot of communities that lean into whether folk instruments or traditions do get marginalized or sidelined, which is a bit of a shame. They often get used for marketing purposes, but they don't get rewarded for that, which I think is a bit of a shame too. So sorry, I'm touching on so many different things here, but I find it really lovely because I am, I suppose, a nosy person. I like to learn about cultures. So I use the bagpipes and the kilt to do that. So I can learn about, let's say, the national instrument of Guatemala or Slovenia, for example. And it's been personally really rewarding, but also I like to think that the content I put out there, people can learn from too.
No, absolutely. I think that's for sure the case, given given the following that you've now gathered. So for sure, your content is very interesting and appreciated. So
for sure. And I have to say, Ross, that I really love the whole narrative that you were just describing about, trying also to spotlight other musical instruments. And when you said India, I was actually looking also through your profile, and I love the pictures with the snake charmer. Like it's awesome. And I love how you also, gave a shout out to, is it called pungi, the instrument? Am I pronouncing
That's one of
it
the
right?
names, yeah, the pungi, yeah.
Oh, the pungi. I think it's really cool, and it's a great cause. And I mean, looking at all of the countries that you're traveling, right? That's a lot, and it's a lot of content that you probably generate from those. So what I was also interested to hear more from you as well is, how are you able to consolidate all of that content, and do you have any tools maybe that you're using, or AI? It's a big hype buzzword. Well, maybe not so much a buzzword anymore. But everyone is using AI. Lots of content creators are open about it too, to help also streamline all of the content that is being generated out there, and how that's getting published and reaching their audiences. So what are your thoughts on the changes in this communication landscape? And are you using any specific trends or tools to leverage in your outreach efforts?
I suppose a really short answer to managing all the content. How do I do that? And crafting it, I suppose, not very well, because I've still got about 10 years of content still to go through and edit.
That's good.
Yeah, it's about dedicating the time to do that. And just things happen so quickly, as you know, and you're always chasing the next thing. I'd love to one day have a team to help with that. But am I using AI right now, and have I been for the past year? Yes, absolutely. Maybe in its simpler forms to begin with, things like auto captions that are added to videos, fantastic. And I think we've all been using AI for a while without us really knowing it. But in the context of what people are looking at now, like, I don't know, like AI videos crafted by XYZ, there's different platforms, or tools to help us send emails or get in contact with folk. How do I use AI right now in that regard? When I'm contacting and reaching out to folk, let's say tourism boards, for example, I definitely use different AI platforms and websites or add-ons that help me get a better idea of who I'll be emailing, to know how best to pitch that email, how short the email needs to be, and what things they focus on. Fantastic. Even talking points. Some of these AI plugins are so powerful, and that has helped me, given me more confidence, I suppose, in writing emails, cold calling, approaching people. I used it last week. Last week, I was at the Arabian Travel Market in Dubai, which is part of the World Travel Market brand, I believe. And that was fantastic because I was able to set my meetings up and then get a rough idea of what these individuals would be like, and maybe talking points, how to approach my discussions with them by going on their LinkedIn profiles, using these plugins, and it would give me a breakdown of their like selling style, conversation style, and it would say whether my style was compatible with them, which is absolutely bonkers. First time I've done that, but it gave me really gave me honestly a lot of confidence in how to approach people, because I know I can be quite intense sometimes. So it was whether or not to like dial it down or just speak really slowly. So I'm using different plugins to do that sort of thing. I think there is this fear of AI, and fear maybe comes, I suppose it's just the lack of knowledge. And I wouldn't say I was the earliest and quickest adapter, and I'm still a bit skeptical because I just maybe can't be bothered. And I think it's lazy, or why should I? But having been introduced to some of these things, I'm like, whoa, I'm saving tons of time, even for finding emails. Very, very useful. And creating content in general, I would say there is value in that because it can speed up the process. But sometimes I see those videos of how can you bulk create mass content? How can you create 200 reels in 30 seconds? I would question the purpose behind doing that, and the impact that would have on folk. And things like that I wouldn't necessarily lean into. However, I do use, for the content creation side of things, I often use ChatGPT to help me get information about stuff. But you need to train these platforms. If you say, write me a script, it often writes the cheesiest script. The wind blows through your hair as as you speak about bagpipes. You're standing on this rock on a cliff, and you're like, what? I didn't even need that. So you have to train these platforms. In 100 words, tell me about the history of double reeded instruments in North Africa. And sometimes they might go, we don't have enough info on that. Or it gives you different points, which I'll then change my wording, and then I'll go and research, because I want to make sure that there's some credible maybe source that has come from. So am I using it? Yes. Do I find it useful? Yes. Is there lots to learn? Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you summarized it really well. And I mean, honestly, of course, everyone is talking about AI. I think this is one of the key topics that we touch upon on every episode, but always the main learning is, of course, there's so much potential and growth, but there's always the need also for the human touch, because we cannot just rely on these platforms to do it all for us. There needs to be some sort of, critical thinking behind it. And I think what you said about the 200 reels in 30 seconds, I mean, of course, the purpose of that, I think, is very questionable, and it always needs to be linked with some sort of strategy, right? And that's, I think, what makes you one successful content creator, because, of course, you are probably doing that, and, thinking about those things and making sure that what you put out there resonates with your audience. And because you've been so successful, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you started in 2014. So that's already, a good track record that you've accomplished there. I think it would be interesting to hear from your point of view what you think might be, the differences in starting as a content creator now compared to how it was maybe back in the day. Do you think it's harder, easier, challenging? What are your perspectives on that front?
Ooh, in a very short answer, and then we can expand on that. I think it has never been easier to be a content creator. Yeah. Because there's so many tools, there's so many ways of being a content creator, and the industry is ready for it. I suppose what industry? Almost every industry. Like, it's bonkers to even think that I was at a conference last year in the Middle East, and the largest sponsor of this YouTube video content creator conference was a brand called DP World, Dubai Ports Authority. They own something like 10% of the world's ports. Why is a logistics company sponsoring a content creation summit? That is bonkers. Isn't that insane? Because they realize the value of this new type of marketing. Let's move away from traditional media. So the demand is there. So of course there's going to be supply. Back 10 years ago, there wasn't really the demand for it. And I think those that maybe pushed the boundaries and were braver with things like videos are some of the top performing content creators now. I wish I had been a bit more ballsy with that, but I suppose I was nervous and didn't lean into it as much as I could have. Now, as well, you've got really cheap methods of filming. You just need your mobile phone nowadays to film. There's lower barriers to entry in becoming a content creator nowadays. You don't even need an expensive mobile phone. Editing platforms more than maybe 3 years ago, you had two main options. You had Final Cut Pro or you had Premiere Pro. Each were quite expensive. That's just for video editing, if you're for your viewers watching. Those are quite expensive, so the buy-in was quite costly. Nowadays, you've got CapCut, you've got all these different app-based things which are free to use. So yeah, again, to reiterate that, I think it's never been easier to be a content creator. However, the successful side of things, I suppose that's a different matter. Competition is through the roof, but competition is good because it makes people more creative with what they're doing, and then there's more money being plowed into the industry. So I think, yeah, nowadays maybe there's no road to success, which maybe is a bit overwhelming for folks starting, because you can literally do anything. You can start at home, video yourself, I don't know, cooking in your kitchen or doing other stuff at home, and that could go viral, which I think is quite lovely. And the number of platforms that things are going on, TikTok and whatnot, there's a lot of democratization of people creating content. But at the end of the day, we're all slaves to the algorithm, which has just changed on Instagram.
Yet again. But it's actually very interesting what you're saying, right? Because I think when you go on social media nowadays, what you see is already so many content creators, or sometimes it can feel like that it's already very overcrowded, very saturated. But indeed, you're right. There are also in so many different industries, there is still a lot of space and a lot of demand for that type of marketing, right? So yeah, it's definitely a landscape that has changed a lot in the last few years, and that it will probably continue to change over the next few years with new platforms coming in, with new channels, with the algorithm forever changing. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see where all of that goes.
And I think also because of the competition that you were talking about, I think competition, as you said, is always good. It's motivating as well, because it also pushes you to your limits of, okay, how can I be more creative? How can I, stand out from the crowd? So I wanted to ask you as well, I mean, not for your top 5 tips on how to become a successful content creator, but at least, from your experience, from your learnings, what would you recommend to anyone who's aspiring to become a content creator? Where do you start? How do you go about it? What should you keep in mind if you want to make it out in the big city?
Well, maybe my number one piece of advice would be try and be an expert on something. Yeah, the world is full of generalists. I'm one of them. I'm guilty. Jack of all trades, and I'm a master of none. And that's what I think lots of education systems plow out. But really try and delve deep into something and be your expert on those spices from West Africa, because people are interested in those sort of things, or the dentist, or that maybe politician starting out focusing on particular aspects of the political world. Yeah, being an expert on something, and people will follow you for that, or come to you because you'll be the leading knowledge in that thing. If you are like travel vloggers, people like me are a dime a dozen. There's so many people wanting to be inspiring travel blogger. Yeah, you can do that, but find the second, I suppose, advice is find your niche. You can still go into those spheres, because it's very easy to copy or emulate and take inspiration from what's out there, but find your niche in that. I tried to do that with the bagpipes. I think maybe I was a bit early for the industry. Maybe it was a bit too niche to begin with. But maybe I'm getting there. And then the third piece of advice, what could I say? Oh, there's lots of things, but I'll try and keep it to 3. Make lots of mistakes, because you'll learn from them. That's a bit generic, but we'll throw that in there. Make lots of mistakes, because people will call you out on them, and you're definitely going to you're going to learn from them as a result. Yeah, so those 3 things. 1, try and be an expert in something, niche down, and make mistakes.
I love that. I think that's a great piece of advice, and it's all on point. So, but really also about the niche, I think that's really key. And we see this also with a lot of our clients as well, that whenever you have the niche, and especially a lot of our clients are talking to very niche audiences as well, I think it's really crucial that you know how to frame that conversation, and you know how to also be a leader in that conversation by playing on your strengths, by including relevant and accessible information, and being very transparent as well. I think transparency is really key to make those connections with the audience and to engage in that two-way communication, which is not often the case.
That's true.
So I think
being genuine. Yeah, being yourself. If you're trying to fake it, people, the audience is going to pick up on that. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right then. So Julie, if you don't have any other questions, I think we can maybe go on to the recommendations.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
All right, I love that jingle. Okay, so it's recommendations time. Ross, what would your recommendations be for anyone listening to ZN Live today?
Oh, okay. So I'm not a big podcast listener, so I have no podcast recommendations for you lot, but I do have some book recommendations, and I'm going to give you 3. Number 1, and this is, it's basically a geopolitics book, but it's called Prisoners of Geography, and it's written by a geopolitician called, I always forget the surname, Tim, where is it? Marshall. I was going to call him Tim Keller. Tim Marshall. There we go. And he's written a follow-up version. It's called Power of Geography. I honestly think this should be like standard reading in high schools around the world, because it gives you a really good understanding of how and why countries came to be and the importance of geography in politics around the world. Fascinating. And what's lovely is that you can take it chapter by chapter. So if you just want to read about the United States or Russia or Australia, then you can focus on those chapters. Number 2, second book. Don't worry, this is a bit lighter. It's called The Monk of Mocha by Dave Eggers. And this is so great because everyone loves coffee. Well, unless you don't like coffee. But even if you don't like coffee, this is a wonderful book because it's a true story about a Yemeni American chap who was trying to revamp the Yemeni coffee industry. And even if that doesn't like float your boat, it's just throughout the book, there has different like 1-page history descriptions of how coffee was then introduced into India, into Brazil or Argentina, not Argentina, into the Caribbean. And so brilliant reads. I loved it, and fascinating because it gets you learning about a part of the world which is often in the news, especially recently. Yemen. Last but not least is a book called Bananas, which is a bit heavy, maybe for some folk, because it focuses on the United Fruits Company. Again, really valuable because that's probably one of the world's first big multinational companies. Don't quote me on that, but a big one. And it was particularly impactful in a very negative way in Central American politics. That's important for me because I used to live in Guatemala, and they did some interesting things on the political sphere. So that's a great book if you like Central America, and also if you're interested about bananas. And who doesn't like bananas? Now, my other recommendations, and these are folk that I follow on social media. I'll share their Instagrams. I'll start with number 1, a good friend of mine who I found very inspiring. He's called Sai, and he's a journalist, basically a citizen journalist, and his account, as you can see below, is On the Ground with Sai. Now, this guy I used to work with, and he used to work with different news agencies across India, and he now covers stories across India. He visits different states and compiles really lovely and wonderful human interest stories. I actually was able to travel with him in Uttarakhand the other day and shadow him and see what he does. The work he does is so impactful. Second up, I forgot one of my other, No Flomo. There we go. No Flomo, here we go. So this individual, this lady just cycled from Cairo to Cape Town over the past year. And her content is amazing. I also wanted to share her friend who she did it with, but I thought it'd be nice to focus on Flomo for once because her buddy often gets a lot of the media attention. So Flo cycled with a guy called Robert from Cairo to Cape Town, and they made it out of Sudan a week before the civil war kicked off again. So her content's really lovely, and it's probably her content and her buddy Rob's content has been some of the most interesting stuff I've followed over the past year. And last but not least, this other individual here is Will Carmack. I also used to work for this guy. He's a animator based in, I think, California, and he does some incredible animations. The best animations I've seen him do, and I think he was the first maybe to start doing them. He would take an old painting, like a Van Gogh painting, and then he would animate it in the most wonderful way. And he's finally getting credit and recognition and is working with big brands like Adobe and maybe some art galleries. He's just so impressive. And it's all, I believe, self-taught. It's a good range there.
Yes. So catering to everyone's interests. I love that. I'm going to follow all of the accounts, and then I'll see about the books. It's called the heavier tone.
There's audiobooks. If you like an audiobook, listen to Prisoners of Geography with a map out in front of you, because your mind will be blown. They had this great sound bites.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ross. And Julie, do you have any recommendations?
Yes, I do. Not as many as Ross, but I have one, a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart by Matt Abrahams. And it's all about communication, online, offline, tips, tricks. So yeah, each episode is about 20 minutes long or so. So not too long. And yeah, I highly recommend it.
Maybe I should have just done one recommendation.
No, we love that. We have a lot of diversity like that. It's great. It's awesome. And then, well, maybe from my side as well, I was really debating for this episode, because I was initially thinking of recommending also a book that I started in New York, because last week I was in New York. It's called A Little Life, but I'm not going to recommend it because it turns out that it's getting very heavy. So I'm starting off with what I'm not recommending, and now I'll focus on what I'm recommending, which is the shout out we wanted to give on the Thought Cards podcast series with Danielle Corbett. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, which is all about travel and how you can combine, building your wealth by paying off debt and making smart financial decisions while you're also enjoying your travels and achieving all of your personal and professional goals all in one. So if you want to hear more about that, check out the podcast.
Sounds like I need that.
Well, I mean, there's useful tips everywhere. But with that, I think that we've come now to the all the time that we have for this episode. So I want to thank you once again, Ross, so much for all of your valuable insights, input, and advice. This was a very interesting and engaging episode. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks for having me, you lot. And I look forward to working with your team in the future.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.